Hi, Hazel.
Hi, Sylvia.
How are
Good
you
morning.
today?
I'm well. It's been good having a long weekend here in London, so feeling refreshed. Although I indulged a little bit too much in some red wine yesterday, so probably cancelled out all the refreshed feelings. How
Ah,
about you?
that's great. Um, yeah, similar. We didn't have a long weekend, but yet the weather is amazing recently. So yeah, it's just I want to be outside most of the time now. It
Mhm.
makes a whole difference. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Um, so I was thinking, and like as we agreed, maybe we could talk a little bit today about the processes that we do in our work, which is like
Mhm.
coaching and therapy, just to
Mhm.
give people a little bit more awareness of like what are those processes, what they can get out of them, what they can expect. Because some of the people they kind of curious,
Mhm.
as they are very lots of people are attending some form of this process,
Mhm.
these processes. So I think there's a lot of still a lot of misconceptions, and maybe we should just help people to decide if they
Yeah.
should or should not go ahead with it. And so um, I would maybe if you could talk a little bit about the therapy as a process, just to kind of
Mhm.
distinguish it from coaching itself.
Yes, so I have to say, the more and more it's becoming more difficult for me to, as a therapist and coach, to distinguish them because I try to practice more integratively. However, in terms of therapy, most people come to therapy when they're going through stages of life. They might be feeling sad or anxious. They may be going through. They may have experienced a trauma such as abuse, domestic violence, sexual abuse, etc. And sometimes that might be abuse or trauma from the past, but as they've got older, they may get re-triggered again, where something happens and it brings them back to what happened in the past. Or it might be that the trauma from the past has stopped them from actually engaging in healthy relationship or healthy making the healthy decisions. So that could be one way that someone comes to therapy. People come to therapy if they're, for example, they're experiencing a mental health problem or mental disorder. And it's very complex when you're thinking of mental illness and mental disorder because you have so common mental illness like so depression and anxiety, etc. But you may have more complicated mental disorders such as schizophrenia, psychosis, things like that. And so, I mean, we won't have time today to go into the complexity. So, therapy can help you in terms of your emotions and your feelings. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling anxious or angry, you can use therapy to be able to explore that. And not just any kind, because we all get angry and anxious and sad, but when it's affecting your well being and when it's affecting your day to day functioning, it can help if you've got negative thinking around yourself, around life. If you're feeling suicidal or you're experiencing self harming behaviors, therapy can help you to manage that. Um, but also behaviors, certain behaviors. If you've got addictive behaviors, for example, like a drug addiction, a sexual addiction, or even some disorders such as eating disorders, etc. So there's a whole range from A to Z of how therapy can work, and it can work with children or adults, all ages. So that's kind of like a lot of people think that therapy only talks about the past,
Mm.
but for some sessions, yes, it might go back to your past in terms of understanding your childhood, you know, how you were brought up, how your values and beliefs were formed, and in terms of trying to help you to make sense of who you are.
Hmm.
But therapy can also look at the here and now, what's happening for you here and now.
Hmm.
Um, and the therapist, it's there's a complication, sorry, the confusion in terms of what is counseling and therapy. So you can go to a counselor for some of these issues, in terms of if you're having anxiety and depression, but therapists are much more trained. They go through longer training, longer processes, and in terms of meeting the criteria to be accredited. So some of the issues that a therapist will work with, a counselor might not be able to work with that. So counselor might be able to work with more sort of low level kind of issues. Although there's some counselors who are extremely qualified and might be able to do all the work of a therapist. Um, and I think that's probably enough for now in terms of the sort of basis of therapy. We could probably put some links later, in terms of if you want to research more in therapy, they can go to the links to find out a bit more.
Mhm. So
And so that's gone.
yeah, so I think like overall, it's like I would see therapy as looking inwards because
Mm-hmm.
it's very hard for us often to get out of our heads. So we
Mm-hmm.
like the advantage of that process is to kind of like get the ideas about what's in you, to from the other person. So like it is kind of like a nearly a ping pong because you're trying to figure out what's going on here with the other person who's more
Yeah.
aware of the processes, psychological processes.
Yes, so the therapist's role is to help you, the client, to help the client to try and figure out what is, what the problem is. Some people come and they know what the problem is already. Some people don't know what the problem is. So the therapist will be asking questions that helps the client to start thinking and to answer, to make sense of what's going on. But we also use interventions, like different types of intervention. That might be questions, it might be using techniques, it might be using creative stuff like art, visualization, meditation. So it's quite complex, and it's going inwards, but also you have to be able to relate what's going inwards to the external factors. So traditional therapy was more about, you come like Freud, you go and you lie down on the chair and you just talk about your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts. But that didn't take into consideration that what you're going through as a client would affect your relationships.
Mhm.
So if you're feeling traumatized or sad or depressed, that's going to affect your family or your work. So you have to, as a therapist, be able to relate and help the client to understand what's going on in terms of their feelings, how that impacts on the environment, but also how the environment might be affecting them
Mhm.
in terms of their mental health. So it's not separate, it's quite a complex system where you're working with the individual, what's going on internally for them, but also helping them to connect to the external factors such as relationship, environment, etc.
Mhm.
And therapy, you have to be committed. It's not like I come and I go. You have to commit to. Sometimes you can have short-term therapy where it might just be a few sessions, and depending on the problem and how long and the impact. But for some people, therapy might be more than a year
Yeah.
or 2 years. I say if it's going on and on forever, then you have to question that and the motivation of the therapist. You could come to therapy, do finish your work, and maybe in a few years' time you may need to come back again or never. So each therapy and therapist is different.
Hmm. Hmm.
And there's 101 different types of therapy as well.
Yeah, that's true. Uh,
Yeah.
so like in terms of like the process itself, it is similar to coaching because like what
Mhm.
you're trying to do is help the client to develop new life skills that will be
Mhm.
more helpful to achieve certain results, right?
Yeah.
However, like in coaching, from what I've been studying, and like it's really about this moment now and the future, right? We don't really, you could take some elements from the past, but we don't dig as deep as you do in the therapy, right?
Yes. So for me, how I see coaching, when I'm in a coaching context, I like the idea, which is the model that I like to use a lot, which is a grow model because it's so basic, and it's very goal focused, outcome focused. So most time the client comes and they have an idea that they want to achieve something in life, like they want a career change or etc. So you as a coach, you're helping facilitate that journey with them and helping them to achieve those outcomes. Um, so they don't necessarily need to look into how they're feeling, but you might have to go through sometimes if there's a block with the client in coaching, you may need to explore what's the block in terms of them moving forward. And that's where you're probably going to do a bit of internal work in terms of the emotions and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I agree with you. I think it's not therapy, it's more in depth, it's more it's longer term and it's much more emotional. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
coaching, it's probably more goal focused and outcome focused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that's the a huge difference between them. And also just to kind of like because lots of people are scared to get those get into those processes because they
Mm-hmm.
see themselves as like, well, I'm gonna be labeled as having mental problems. Like, still,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's we made a huge progress, but still some people would see that as you know being
Yeah, yeah,
incapable to like do their own stuff on their own, let's say.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's just a stigma and stereotype. Although I think the millennium generation, they're becoming much more accepting, more aware, and more comfortable with therapy. And I think it depends on where, because I think in the US, therapy is much more common and accepted. And certainly in the UK over the years, it's becoming more accepting and around the world. But I think there is an idea because of the media
Yeah.
and the stereotype or in the past around mental illness where they saw people as mad and or mad and bad. So if you had a mental illness, that means that you bad and you're going to do something crazy to someone and kill them. That's just really rare. In extreme situation where someone might be having a psychotic breakdown, they may hear voices that tells them that they have to hurt someone or hurt
Yeah.
themselves, but that's extremely rare and it's managed better now. But most people, I'd say everyone in probably almost everyone, unless you're perfect, would have had some kind of mental health or kind of emotional issue over the time. It just means that maybe you don't need to go to a therapist or you might have a good support system like church or family or a community that supports you. But so really, I think it's important to know that there's nothing wrong with having emotions or feelings and thoughts that's affecting your well-being, and it's a common thing. And going to a therapist, it's an investment in yourself in terms of if you're wanting to live a happier, healthier life, and you want to move forward and have healthy relationships, that would be an investment for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously the therapist is involved, but actually it's about you, your life, taking steps. So I think it's the same with coaching as well, really,
Yeah.
in that respect, where although there's less stigma about coaching, although some people are still not aware what coaching is, there's not as much stigma about coming to coaching.
Mm-hmm.
It's more, it started with businesses, didn't it, in terms of people focusing on the business outcomes. So maybe to have a coach seems more, what would you say, not fancy, seems more indulgent,
Yeah.
like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, like, again, as we were talking about it, you can resolve many problems with coaching too. Depends what kind of uh, problems they are, but like, coaching also takes a lot of range of different problems, from like, yeah, business to stress management to uh,
Mhm.
many different things. Obviously, it really, I would say, like, if somebody wants to thinking about either to take up coaching or a therapy, they really need to think of like what it's supposed to change. What is the end result for me? How I
Mhm.
want that to look like, and kind of like maybe talk about the person that you want to have a therapy or coaching with. See,
Mhm.
what the qualifications are like. what is
Mm.
their expertise. I think it is important, and kind of like assess yourself, like thinking of like, okay, what was my past, and how do I feel right now?
Mm.
Because yeah, as you said, like both of those processes, they require a lot of work. And from what I can see and from what I heard from so many people, they think that the therapist, especially the therapist, is the person that will just sit on the chair and listen to all the problems. Like every week you just go there just to
Mm.
kind of uh, talk about your issues, which is not the case, right?
Yeah, I mean, actually, there's some people who still practice like that, but it's more where they're still, which is the more psychoanalytical, psychodynamic. Some analysts would practice like when you come on the chair and you talk, but that's important to know because there's some clients who like that,
Mm,
who just likes to come and sit on the sofa or lie in the chair and just talk about themselves, and they just want someone to listen to them because maybe growing up no one listened to them, so for them that's it's a purging but it's a therapeutic process. But for most clients, the way in which I practice as a therapist, which is systemic psychotherapy mixed with other therapy, but my main therapy is systemic psychotherapy. The idea is that where we function in relationships, you're not on your own. So the process is collaborative. You're coming, you're engaging in a process with a therapist where you're making a contract to work on the issue. Sometimes you might not know what the issue is. You just know that you're unhappy, that you're sad, that you're something's not right in you and you need help. So the therapist will help you to try and figure out what that is. And then when you're clearer, then you can start working towards that goal. And a lot of the times you might come in therapy thinking, oh, I'm coming to work on this, but then something else comes up. Um, but yes, I think it is it's kind of important to choose your therapist or coach.
mm-hmm,
Um, Make sure you do research. If you're someone who wants to be challenged and you wants to have a collaborative process, then you have to find someone who fits that your personality. If you're someone who wants to be maybe directed or like, then you have to think about, okay, what kind of therapy would suit me or what kind of coaching would suit me. Um, but I think it's important to know that it's not the job of the coach or the therapist to tell you what to do. They're
mm,
more kind of helping you. I think that's where the similarities is. They're helping to guide you and to lead you and to encourage you and support you.
mm-hmm,
So maybe I'm just curious in terms of your experiences as a coach, kind of what what have been your where have you seen like most growth or change in people in terms of their that's probably not a good question, but I guess it's kind of what are some of the highlights for you in your coaching journey in terms of the clients that you work with
mm-hmm,
that totally yes, coaching does work.
mm-hmm. I think it's usually the mindset change,
Hmm.
because the thing is like, yeah, with both processes, uh, like most of people, they're just not aware that they
Hmm.
can do things differently.
Hmm.
They are stuck. And I like the fact that in those processes you can just get the people out of their head. But again, if I was to give someone an advice before they get into any of those processes, is to keep your mind open,
Hmm.
right? Because you might heard some stuff that will trigger you. That's the reality.
Yeah.
You will discover certain things that you'll be like, you will feel like you were wrong. But
Hmm.
this is not the point of any of those processes. The point is to make you aware that, and get you out of the ongoing pattern, because very often we're just like, we're circling around doing the same thing, kind of unaware, and one day we'll wake up, we're like, why things are not changing
Yeah.
for us? And that's
Yeah.
that's why we are looking for more professional advice, right?
Yeah. And I also think with coaching, what I notice that most people who, well, it depends because sometimes with organizations, they might send their employees to be
Mhm.
coached. But if most people who access coaching, they're aware that they're at a different level consciously, they're ready for change
Yeah.
and they're ready to go to the next level or next stage in their life, or they're ready to go, they're going through a transition that they know that they need an extra push or extra support to get to that stage of their life.
Mhm.
I guess with therapy, it's a little bit more different. Some people come ready and knowing, and some people are just not
Yeah.
aware, or they may get into a crisis or a situation where they have no choice. For someone who's, for example, suicidal, or someone who's had an eating disorder, um, or a clinical depression, they're not able to like choose for themselves in therapy. So there are times when maybe a parent or someone who's significant in their life have to force them and say, you need to go to therapy because in order to save your life or save yourself. Whereas with coaching, it's more of a conscious choice.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, obviously therapy is a conscious choice at some level, but you know what I mean? That
Mhm.
coaching, I think people are already at that stage where they think, actually, I want to, I want to commit to this. I want to invest in this.
Yeah.
Or your company might decide that in order to develop their leadership or leaders, they want to invest in their
Mhm.
employees, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a big um, difference between uh, those um, situations, let's say.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think like both of those processes are very helpful. You kind of
Mhm.
like again need to assess yourself and your needs first before checking out. And yeah, I don't think what another tip that I think should be taken into consideration that these are like processes, you know, and very often we're just getting there and we want to be fixed instantly, but it's not like that. It takes time, and sometimes you might be surprised because like I remember I had some sessions when I was like, oh, this thing doesn't work, but after a week or two I got that you know a bulb moment where I was just like, oh, actually, and now it all makes sense. These are very well sometimes kind of complicated processes that they might not be 100% aware. So I remember I was attending some sessions where I would get out and I would be like, well, it doesn't make any sense what we've done here, like I can't see you
Mhm.
know what it's supposed to help me with. But actually after a week or two I would have this bulb moment of like, oh, actually now it makes sense. Because very often like we don't have a control 100% over our mind. So
Mhm.
sometimes we might think, oh, actually it doesn't make any sense, but it will make sense overall very often after some time.
Yeah. I like this. I can't remember you probably have come across that in your training as well, coaching. You know, that unconscious conscious. There's a diagram that says that the things that we're conscious of certain things and we're unconscious. I think it's the learning diagram. So sometimes we don't see ourselves, our weak points, or we don't we don't know everything. And so that's why sometimes going to someone else, even like a mentor or coach or therapist, helps you to see other aspects of yourself or to reveal other parts of you that you weren't aware of, or to help you to maybe um, open up, as you said, to possibilities of doing something different as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think you have to give it time and you have to commit to it, but you also have to um, be willing to do the work
Yeah.
and know that it's not just the coach or therapist's job to do the work, but you have to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be willing to face the uncomfortable things that
Yeah.
comes up. Because I think in both coaching and therapy that could come up where, as you said, it might trigger something in you like an emotion or a feeling and you may not like it.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. And I
that's like a breakthrough.
Yeah, and I think like many people would take it as like, there was something wrong with the a therapist or a coach, like, that
Mhm.
they are kind of like vicious saying those things, which is not the case. Like, at the end of the day, if you're the client, the other person really wants to help you. Like there is no agenda
Mhm.
for therapist or coach, to harm you. There is
Yeah.
no point. So it's really within yourself, but like, and it's important to catch those moments when you're triggered, and
Mhm.
asking yourself why am I triggered, why this. Sometimes you might think, okay, if you hear something like, oh, maybe you could exercise more often, like some people would take that as an offense, like something
Mhm.
so simple, right? But it's really about them.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I think that's probably, I agree, but also I think that comes with trust and safety. So you have to feel that you can trust your coach or therapist. And that might come over time after a few sessions, that you feel safe enough to be able to reveal parts of you, but also to accept feedback or challenges from the person who's coaching, or doing therapy with you. um and also because sometimes you have to know, because maybe there's the odd coach or therapist that's not qualified enough
yeah.
or not experienced enough, that might um say things that's not very, what's the word, very responsible.
Hmm.
So I think you as the client have to also know that you can also challenge the therapist or the coach to say, actually, I don't understand this, or I don't agree with you, or or what did you mean by that as well.
Hmm.
um so I think it should be a two-way process, but I think you have to feel safe enough in
Hmm.
order to to give of yourself and to
Hmm.
be able to take the risk to do the work, whatever the work is.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, definitely. So just as a wrap up, what
Mm-hmm.
do you what would you suggest to a person that is looking for coaching? What is no for coaching?
What is a no-no?
Yeah.
Um, well, for sure, coaching isn't therapy. Coaching is there to help you to on your journey in terms of change, to facilitate you to make a decision. So, really, first of all, do your research, and look for. But first of all, you have to have recognized within yourself that you want change and you want help. So be clear about what you want help with, and then try and research what's available, because there's a lot of coach online and around who are calling themselves coaches, but they're not actually qualified or experienced enough. So do your research on that. Just be careful in terms of kind of the type of coach, because there are different types of coaches, isn't it? So if you're wanting to get someone, if you're going through a change in your relationship, you might want a relationship coach.
Hmm.
But if you're looking for someone that's with your career, you may want a specific career coach, or there are coaches who can do the two together.
Hmm.
Not afraid to ask questions, and be willing to be challenged and to do the work.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like the kind of clear things. I know that it would cost money,
Yeah.
it would cost time, but that's the other thing. Maybe we think of the timing, that it's not. I think the average would be probably people could start fortnightly to monthly, to 6 weeks. So there's different time period as well and time frame, and it's not forever.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a time limited period, isn't it?
Hmm.
How about you? What would you advise them? And what are your no nos? I
Yeah.
don't ever put much no nos. Yeah.
uh, yeah. So similarly, like I would say, mm, check your emotional state, like your mental state. Like it is
Mhm.
super important because um, oftentimes, like people that are experiencing quite, challenging and quite deep problems on the mental side, they trying, for
Mhm.
example, to do coaching, which um, ultimately won't work.
Mhm.
Like you really have to be in somewhat of the balance. I would think also like there is a possibility to have both if you're kind of like therapy and coaching. So
Mhm.
obviously you can resolve some problems with the therapist and like still, for example, do the career coaching on the side.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
really stops those two processes.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of like understand what is the distinction between those two,
Mhm.
right? um, so yeah, like I found both of processes really helpful. I
Mhm.
found them as an investment in myself because I can see myself totally different now than a few years ago.
Mhm.
And I'm not afraid to say that, I've been to therapy, and it helped me tremendously in my life. I made a huge step to where I wanted to be, and seen myself in a different position, in a different place now than when I was a few years ago. So yeah, I
Yeah.
can only um, talk about it in a all the good words, but I know that some people will still be very hesitant, and maybe that's why they will find the those processes unhelpful at the end, because I think there is something with the mindset. If you're coming very skeptical into something, most of the times it won't work.
Mhm. It won't work. I think it goes back to commitment and time and investment. I suppose for me as a therapist, I've had therapy, but if you're training as a therapist and you're working as a therapist, you have to have ongoing what we call, in my thing, supervision. And it's similar to therapy where you have to go to your supervisor, and that person, you explore your whole journey as a therapist in terms of the things that's challenging you. Sometimes you work with difficult clients, you bring that, but also your what's going on for you internally.
Mhm.
So I have someone that I see talk to regularly in terms of supporting me. And for as a coach, I've had coaching and I know the value. And because of I had coaching is why I decided to train as a coach. I was already a qualified therapist, but I wanted a different way to just to add to my career. And I just thought I wanted to find what brought me to coaching was where therapy takes a while for you to get to a positive place. Coaching kind of was already saying that it's a quicker way to focus in a more positive light. So that kind of made me more interested in coaching. So I think both would work. And yes, you can have like a free, generally some therapists or coaches might give you a free first session, but it's not free. I think there's a lot of free stuff online and free stuff on social media, but which is fine because sometimes I like free stuff, but it's not enough to invest in yourself. So you have to know that anything like your education or anything that's going to bring change and transformation, it's not necessarily going to be free. It's an investment, and you're not doing it for the coach or the therapist. Of course, we're getting a fee, and of course, it's helping us to maybe build our practice. But really, equally, I mean, I'm passionate about what I do, and that's why I studied it. I didn't study it like to be a millionaire. I studied both professions because I wanted to invest and help people. So, and but I had to invest financially in myself to get to this level. So it's the same if you're going to bring about change in your life.
Mhm.
It's to
Yeah,
invest.
yeah, and plus, like, especially when you're in that kind of industry, you always trying to upgrade your
Mhm.
qualifications. So like yeah, many people are kind of upset, oh, why the fees are so expensive, but it really
Mhm.
takes a lot of work for the coach or therapist to be at certain level. And plus it's this ongoing thing, plus it's the supervision, as you mentioned, loads of
Mhm.
many factors. So that's why the fees could be like seen by some people as quite high, but it's actually it's not just like waking up one day and deciding to be a therapist or a coach. So
No, you study a lot. There's a lot of, for example, as a therapist, it's over like, I mean, I've been qualified for 20 something years, but it's you have to study up to master level, PhD level, for some people, and you have to pay money like a university courses. You have to pay every year. You have to pay for registration, CPD. Similar with coaching, you have to continue paying for your development. But if you think about the most successful people, a lot of them have invested in coaching and therapy. So I'm not saying that everyone has to, but look at the people that we follow or we see as role models. They've invested the time in doing more, in training more, in getting more support from mentors, from coaches, because they know that they're the product and they have to invest in themselves.
yeah.
Um, So I guess if there's any message I want to say is more about, if you feel, whoever's watching, that you need that extra support, just an investment in a good therapist or a good coach. Doesn't have to be us, but it'd be nice if it's us. It's a really brilliant investment.
Yeah, and last word is just like, yeah, don't be afraid. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't met any therapist or coach who bites.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, just again, be willing to to engage and check it out. Obviously, sometimes it could be, it takes few attempts before you find the
Mhm,
right coach or the right therapist for you.
mhm,
Like,
mhm,
it's like with the relationship, it sometimes it doesn't work for whatever reason.
mhm.
And that's okay. Be willing to change and be willing to try it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree.
Right. Any other thoughts that you have on your mind?
No, I think this is an ongoing conversation. We could probably come back to more details, more in depth later, but this is just like a taster session in terms of the difference between therapy and coaching. And maybe if people want to ask more questions, they could contact us, and we'll be happy to offer more details.
Yeah, definitely. And we're open for any comments. As you probably saw, we always comment back. Like, we always give people replies, because it's important to have the ongoing conversation. We don't do it just for ourselves,
Mhm,
but really to support you guys. So,
mhm. And thank you. Thanks for supporting us once again.
thank you.